Welcome to Gruesome, your horrific true crime podcast. I am Meg, and Connie, fresh with a tan back from vacay, is going to tell us about Dolly Oesterreich. But before
Yeah.
that, do I do this or do we put them in now?
No, I just put it in.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry. I was like, wait, what are we doing these days?
What's happening?
We haven't recorded in a while.
I know. I just got back from Savannah. We were in Tybee Island with like my family, like my unit, my in-law unit, and like my brother-in-law unit. And it was a very interesting time. But I did get a pretty good tan and a pretty big bruise on my arm. If you're watching this like on Patreon, you'll be able to see it. I ran into the mantle at the Airbnb and I have like the gnarliest rectangle bruise on my arm.
It looks perfectly rectangle.
Yeah, and you can see like there's like this area right here is like where it was a scab. Like I thought it was gonna like that part would bruise, but that part never did. So I don't know. Well, tonight we're going to talk about a case that I have read about quite a few times and I've had several requests for. And if you've heard this case before, welcome back. And if not, get ready because this one is so freaking bizarre. I told Meg at the beginning before we recorded that this case is a little lighter, not in terms of like there is still murder involved, but it's not as like brutal and like terrifying. But I felt like with the previous week that especially the United States has had, that it was due. Just something like a little like, oh. So here we go. Dolly Oesterreich was born Walburga Korschel in 1880. So we're taking it back.
Walburga.
Walburga. She was a German immigrant who immigrated with her family to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is unclear if she was born in Germany and immigrated like as soon as she was born with her family, or if she was born immediately, like not immediately, but like as soon as they got here and her parents were the immigrants. 1880. So there's not the record keeping back then is not like what it is today.
We don't have a cloud full of information.
No. When she was 12, and because this is the early 1900s, she took a job at a textile mill where the women primarily made aprons. The owner of the mill, Fred William Oesterreich, another German immigrant, and honestly, he ran the mill like it was his mill, but he was only a few years older than she was. He would hire other German immigrants to the mill just as like his way of giving back and like, keeping things, I don't know how to say that. Just
like as a community.
Yeah, like keeping things within the community. Dolly was an attractive, charismatic, beautiful young girl, and it didn't take long before she would catch the eye of Fred. Fred was known to be distant and unlikable, according to other employees at the mill, but that didn't stop Dolly from falling in love with him. And I'm sure the money aspect helped because Fred was doing very well for himself. But you know what they say? Money can't buy happiness. The hard-nosed businessman who was often known for the time he spent drinking instead of the time he spent with his wife, the two seemed like an unlikely match for this. Dolly was charismatic. She had a sunny disposition. She was just all of the books that I read said she was like a ball of sunshine.
She was a joy to be around.
A joy to be around. Heard it before. She started to take, once her and Fred got married, she started to take on more of like an employee relations role instead of just a factory worker. And it wasn't uncommon to see Dolly trailing behind Fred as he handed out abrasive comments to his female employees. He was heavily critical of their work. And she would come behind him, smooth out the ruffled feathers that were caused by her husband. By all accounts, they were happy. I did read that Dolly and Fred had a son that passed unexpectedly, and that did cause some strain on their marriage. He was in his early teens when he died. So they had gotten pregnant like right after which obviously that is going to cause a strain on any relationship when something tragic like that happens. But to their neighbors, they seemed like they were doing pretty well. Sometimes they would bicker, but I mean, what married couple doesn't? On August 22nd, 1922, the couple went out for the evening. It unfortunately wasn't an evening of bliss, and the couple entered the home in an argument. Neighbors would hear a few gunshots ring out from the residence, and they called the police. When the police arrived at their home, they could hear, oh, Fred, being cried out, but it didn't seem like it was coming from the living room area where they were heading. Upon walking into the living room, investigators discover the body of Fred Oesterreich, dead from 3 gunshot wounds. But the woman screaming out for Fred wasn't in the room. Investigators took a closer look and listened, and they could hear the noise was coming from a nearby closet in the master bedroom. Police opened the locked closet door to find a shaken up Dolly. Still dressed to the nines from their night out, Dolly starts to recount the evening for the chief of detectives, Herman Klein. They went out, came home, someone broke in. The couple was getting settled in when a person busted in to rob the place. In the scuffle, because Fred wasn't the type to just sit and let his home get robbed. He was going to protect his wife and he was going to put up a fight. His efforts were fruitless when the burglar shot Fred and proceeded to shove Dolly back into the closet before bolting out the door. She was so lucky to be alive. She couldn't believe her husband had been murdered. Chief Klein starts immediately questioning Dolly. Did you and your husband ever fight? Oh, no, not ever. Not even a little bit? Never. There's never been an argument between Fred and myself.
Dolly, we can't work in absolutes here.
Exactly. That statement, along with the fact that she was still immaculately dressed, still in pristine makeup, and that raised a lot of red flags for Klein. He didn't trust her at all. He knew that all couples had spats. No couple was perfect. And so why would she claim different? Why would she be so adamant that they never fought, even getting frustrated with him when he tried to press the issue? He knew she was hiding something. Why would someone burglarize a home to the extent of committing a murder and only steal a diamond-studded watch? There was a wallet full, like completely full of cash in Fred's wallet that was left in his pants pocket. Nothing else had been taken despite the room being disheveled. And when the crime lab came back with the report that Fred had been murdered by a .25 caliber weapon, Detective Klein was convinced that Dolly had murdered her husband. In his opinion, a .25 caliber gun was a woman's gun. No
It's
burglar
purse
was,
pistol.
yeah. No woman was going to use that small of a caliber gun, especially if murder was their motive. He tried to prove her guilt, but he was left with no luck. The question remained, if Dolly had murdered her husband, how did she lock the door to the closet from the outside? And my friends, in order to get to the bottom of what happened that night, we have to travel back in time almost 2 decades.
2 decades?
Mhm.
How long had they been together for that long at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they had been together for 20, 34 years at the time. Or 50, they had been married for 15 years. They were married for like 34 total.
Oh, okay.
On a particularly boring day in the apron factory, a sewing machine broke down. Dolly, who was known to be quick to be the person to step in and help, she called the Singer Sewing Machine Company, who told her that they would be sending a repairman to fix the machine. Enter Otto Sandhuber, a blue-eyed teenager. Otto himself wasn't sure how old he was. He had been an orphan who was adopted. He believed he was of German Jewish descent, but he wasn't completely sure. Like I said, he didn't even know how old he was. He thought he might be 16 or 17.
Somewhere in there.
Dolly was immediately attracted to this shy teenager. And she only had one thought in her mind. She had to have him. You see, there was also this other very big problem in Fred and Dolly's marriage. While Fred spent his evenings and extra time tied to a whiskey bottle, Dolly spent her free time in the arms of other men. It was
Like a
almost
lot of them?
it was a constant string of extramarital affairs.
Oh boy.
There are some reports that they think Dolly's desire to have Otto in her life was twofold. Like, one, it was the mix of the grief of losing her son, and in a way it could oddly fill the void that her son
Fill
had
that
left.
void, yeah.
Dolly, who was in her early 30s at the time, quickly devised a plan on how to get Otto alone. Coincidentally, the sewing machine in Dolly's bedroom had also stopped working. So she phoned Fred, telling him that he needed to arrange for the repairman from the factory to get there to help her get the sewing machine going. Singer Company once again sends over Otto to the Oesterreich residence. When he arrived at the home, Dolly greeted him at the door. She was dressed in a silk robe, stockings, and slippers. She had taken a bath in perfume and was definitely DTF, even if Otto didn't realize it.
It sounds like like movies from the like 40s and 50s with like
That's
the
what I thought.
starlets. Yeah, like you
Like,
picture it.
immediately, like, with a gin martini and
Or is it something like
yep.
yeah, Mae West, very Mae West.
Dolly led him to the bedroom where she sat on the bed while he worked busily away getting her sewing machine repaired. Otto would occasionally look up from his job of repairing the sewing machine, only to discover that every time he looked up, Dolly was letting a little more and more of her robe fall. And he realized that other than her stockings and slippers, she was completely nude under her gown. Even though Otto was embarrassed by the whole ordeal, he realized that Dolly was giving him the green light, and the two started that day a very intense love affair. For 3 years, the two made time for each other whenever they could. They met in hotels when he couldn't sneak over. Dolly started faking being sick so she could stay at home from her duties at the factory. And she would even sneak him over whenever Fred would be gone for a night for like lodge meetings or being out with his friends. But nosy neighbors started to realize that there was a young guy who was in and out of their home. At first, she kept the neighbors at bay by telling them that her lover was her vagabond half brother. And for those of you like me who didn't know what that meant, it's someone who's like a wanderer who doesn't really settle down. They're kind of like a drifter. But eventually a nosy neighbor was like, "Hey, Fred, there's this young guy that like is always at your house when you're gone."
Snitch.
Snitch. And naturally, Fred was like, "Hey, Dolly, who is this guy? Like, who's here?" And Dolly, who always had answers for everything, calmly responded that there had been a traveling magazine and book salesman who wouldn't stop pestering her to buy these books. And he had started showing up often just to try to like encourage her to buy these. This got Fred off her tail, but unfortunately for the secret lovers, this also got Otto off her tail as well. You see what I did there?
I see.
I love a good pun. But Dorothy, Dolly. What am I doing? But Dolly couldn't stay away. She thought to herself she had to do something so she could continue this affair with Otto. She couldn't take not having him in her life. So she
Gonna
thought of a
have her
plan.
cake and eat it too.
The woman with a plan. She approached Otto with the idea that he could come live in her attic. And Otto eagerly agreed. He didn't
Otto.
he didn't even care that he would have to quit his job at the repair shop. He was going to be able to live there rent free. He got to be close to the woman that he loved all of the time. No more sneaking in and out of like he had been doing. And luckily for Dolly, Otto dreamed of being a writer. So he was amped about the idea that he could focus on his writing career without having to have an actual job. So Dolly cleaned up the attic. She furnished it with an oil lamp, a comfortable bed, a chamber pot. I mean, what else did he need? He
Yeah, he's
brought
just gonna
books.
stay up there forever?
He added books and pens to his new apartment. During the day when the Oesterreichs were at work, he would come out of his hiding hole and do household chores like sweep floors, clean up, do dishes, get dinner prepped. He started making bathtub gin because, prohibition area. He would
Also, like,
even
when
be
you live in the attic, what else are you gonna do?
what are you going to do?
Make bathtub gin.
He would even be allowed yard time, and I'm using that in, like, the prison sense and not, like, a literal yard time, like, being outside, because this guy was never allowed to be seen outside. But his yard time consisted of being able to spend time downstairs doing exercises or whatever while the couple would go out for the night. Dolly outfitted the attic trap door with a padlock so when Fred was home, it could be locked. And she told Fred that the reason she had a padlock on it because she didn't want anyone to be able to touch her furs. She had an extensive collection of like fur coats, fur shawls, and she wanted them to be able to be safe. And Fred did not push the issue. He's like, okay. Like typical guy, he's like,
how like a husband, yeah.
yeah, okay, whatever.
Whatever.
Dolly's attendance issues at work increased as she would frequently miss so she could stay at home and have extracurricular activities with Otto. He would later say that sometimes she would make him have sex with her up to 8 times a day.
Dolly.
I
My
know.
goodness.
I was like, how do you have this energy and where could I get some? Because like I get tired walking to make coffee. Like that's a lot. Good for you though. I mean, not good that you're hiding a man in your house.
Yeah, like I am
Have sex with
equal
your
parts
husband.
impressed and disappointed in Dolly right now.
That's how I felt. It's
Yeah,
good.
just
You just wait.
oh boy.
Dolly would release the trapdoor to the attic quietly before they left, and when the couple would close the front door, Otto would be free to feast like a king on all the leftovers that were in the fridge or whatever food was out. And whenever Fred would be like, I thought we had more meat than this. I thought we had more leftovers, especially on the nights like when that's what they would serve for dinner. Dolly would just gaslight the shit out of him and tell him, you ate the majority of this when you were drunk the night before. And Fred wouldn't question it. He'd be like, oh, sounds
What a
right. Okay.
psycho.
But living above your lover, your married lover, wasn't always sunshine and rainbows. Otto and Dolly had a heated argument because Otto was annoyed that he could also hear her and Fred having sex. One of the times they were in the middle of like intercourse and Dolly told Fred to quiet down because he was being too loud. And he was like, who cares if anyone hears us? And she was like, I do, the neighbors. Like, it's embarrassing. I don't want that. And then Otto eventually agreed to be okay with her having sexual relations with Fred because Dolly also gaslit the crap out of Otto and was like, this is part of being married. I don't want him to be suspicious. Like, I just have to do this. A year, a whole year into this living arrangement, Fred started becoming very paranoid. He could hear odd noises. He
Yeah,
thought his
he has
house was
every right to be paranoid.
Mhm. He would hear things that Dolly would just be like, that's a rat, that's a mouse. But one night, Fred sat straight up in bed because he knew he heard the sound of a man clearing his throat. And he blurted out, I wasn't imagining that. But Dolly, once again, gaslighted him by declaring that he was losing his mind. And honestly, if he wanted to know what was wrong, he was drinking too much.
Oh my gosh, Dolly, you're a mess.
Mm-hmm. And Otto was in total isolation, but he didn't care. He had Dolly and his imagination to keep him company. He would write these beautiful short stories based on fictitious characters exploring like the South Seas. And he would handwrite all of his stories and then give them to Dolly for her to type on her typewriter because he can't be in this attic typing away because you're going to be able to hear that. And so she would have to write these stories out for him when she wasn't busy at work with her husband or sleeping with her live-in attic boyfriend. Like, who had,
Live-in attic boyfriend.
and then she started sending them off to Otto. And after like months of like rejection letters, if you're a writer, like you're not going to book your first writing gig immediately. He started making some money from his stories, but Dolly kept all of it.
Dolly. Oh my God.
She just
Like, at
saved it
first I
for
was
him.
like, okay, we're rooting for Dolly. And now we're no longer rooting for her. No.
One day, Fred was in the garden and happened to look up in the attic where he saw the figure of a man in the window, the window was off limits to Otto. He was not supposed to go by the window, especially
Okay,
in the middle of the
well,
day.
he's an adult human being. He's allowed to be in a window.
He's allowed to be in the window. He took off in a huff, but he was stopped by Dolly, who insisted that she would be the one to go check to see what was going on. Upon what I'm assuming is a very thorough investigation, she reported to Fred that there was no one up there and that she was very worried for her husband and he needed to see a doctor for these hallucinations that he was having.
I'm sure,
And
Dolly.
and he did because he didn't want to worry or stress his wife. Like, he wanted to make sure he was okay for her. So he was prescribed some tranquilizers from his doctor and told to take it easy.
Jeez Louise.
Mm-hmm. The couple moved 2 times, 2 additional houses, and all of them had the same requirement from Dolly. The houses had to have an attic so she could keep her prized collection of furs safe. Fred's like, okay, whatever.
Your furs, right.
Your furs. He had no idea. Like, no idea. The couple started arguing more. Fred was drinking more. And he was either depressed and silent towards Dolly or he was loud and argumentative. At this point, Dolly had been having an affair with Otto for over a decade.
And he'd been living in her attic for a decade?
For 7 years at this point.
That's like close enough.
Yeah. In 1918, so this is like even past that, Fred and Dolly went to a party where the turmoil in their marriage was in full display as they got into an argument and Fred stormed home. He left Dolly at the party. He rolled out. He's like, I'm done with this. But what happens when that front door closes? Otto comes down to party. So Fred walked into his house and sitting at this table was 32-year-old, vitamin D deficient, I'm sure, extremely pale Otto eating a huge leg of lamb.
Hey man, aren't you the guy that fixes the sewing machines?
Well, Fred was like, what are you doing here? So Otto did the only thing that he could think of. He lied. He just responded with, I'm sorry, I'm hungry. And when he asked if he was the one who had been sneaking in and eating all of the meat in the house, he was just like, yeah.
Yep, it's me. I've been doing it for 7 years.
He tossed Otto out onto the street before informing Dolly that he wasn't crazy. He knew that food had been missing. He wasn't getting up with the munchies in the middle of the night, smashing it and not remembering it. Dolly panicked, and Otto was very obviously terrified of the situation because there was a huge size difference here because you're like malnourished living in an attic. You haven't seen sun and for how long?
You're not allowed in front of the window. You have to survive on bathtub gin and leftover leg of lamb.
Which, who has that in their fridge? I was thinking to myself, like, if you go to my house, different times. Like, I have some hot dogs and smoked sausage. But honestly,
you just walked in your house and there's just a guy sitting at the bar, just like eating your cold hot dogs. You're like, what are you doing?
Look, we're not messing around here because that's some meth behavior. I was telling my husband about this case and like what happens. And he's like, can you imagine having a boyfriend in our attic? I was like, I would forget that he was up there and he would just die.
You can't make any noise and you can't come down. Like, you're always home now too. And so is he. So it's like you're just stuck up there,
squirrel?
Man. Squirrel. Definitely a squirrel.
Dolly convinced Otto. She's like, look, we have a situation here. I know how we can fix this. I told you, a woman with a plan always had the answer. So she convinced Otto that he should move from Milwaukee to Los Angeles. And all of the money that she had been saving, because it was pretty significant from his story publishing, that she would give him. Otto was miserable there. He only wanted to be with Dolly. They would write letters back and forth. Dolly had a P.O. box that had been set up for her to send off his stories, because can't send that from like her address. And Dolly was also miserable. She was pining for her attic boyfriend. She immediately got to work trying to convince her husband that they should move to LA. She's like, the sunshine, think about it. We could go retire. And Fred wasn't the one to deny Dolly anything. So they
What are
moved
they,
to
like
LA.
40 at this point?
Mm-hmm.
I guess they probably lived,
Mm-hmm.
longer than a lot of people lived in that time.
I think they're almost 50 at this point.
Okay.
So the couple eventually moved to LA in a big house, a huge attic.
With a big old attic for Otto to hunker down in.
Yeah, he moved back in almost immediately. And Fred found a renewed love of life in LA. He loved it there. He was thriving. Like I said, they moved there with the intent of him retiring. But the LA life just lit him up, and he eventually bought another factory and got busy running that place. He's like, I don't want to stop working. I love it here. I love this. This is great.
Good for you, Fred.
Just left Dolly and Otto a lot of time at home by themselves. So this brings us to the date in question from previously, August 22nd, 1922. Dolly and Otto have been involved with each other for almost 20 years, and Otto has been living in her attic for almost 15 of those.
Oh my God.
Uh-huh.
And it's not like Fred didn't know that there was someone in there. Like, because he did. He caught
He knew
them
something
once.
yeah.
Poor Fred.
And it is true that the couple did go out that night. And it's true that they got home and they were loudly arguing. Only they had an upstairs guest who was listening to it all, like a little rat, the whole fight. When he heard a loud thump, he jumped into action because he thought Fred was physically attacking Dolly, when in reality, Dolly tripped over a rug in their house and just ate it. But Otto didn't know that. He's like, I'm going to save the
love of my life.
I'm going to save her. So he grabbed two 25 caliber guns and rushed down the stairs. Upon seeing Otto, Fred had this massive light bulb moment because he immediately recognized Otto as the man eating a leg of lamb at his table at the house
and
back
the
in
guy
Milwaukee.
who fixed his sewing machines at his factory. Like, yeah.
Fred flew into a fit of rage, and I mean, rightfully so, in my opinion.
Yeah, he earned that rage.
He earned it. And a struggle ensued. And Fred was a big dude, and Otto had been living like a vampire for like 15 years, so he wasn't in like peak physical form. He definitely wasn't in physical form to put up a fight against Fred. Fred overpowered Otto, and Otto soon found himself with Fred's hands around his neck and a gun nearby. During the scuffle, one of the guns went off, and a panicked Otto was able to grab the other one and fire several shots towards Fred, 3 of them entering, killing him instantly. Fred Oesterreich was dead on his living room floor, and Otto and Dolly knew that the neighbors would call the police. So Otto, because now he is the person with the plan, decided that he could stage the robbery. So he staged the robbery, he took the watch, he locked Dolly in the closet and retreated to his attic cave, where he remained there through the entire investigation.
Did they ever look up there?
But wait, there's more. Chief Klein could never trip Dorothy up. He said that she was one of the toughest dames he had ever met. She had an
Well, yeah,
answer
she's been
for
lying
every
for literally 15 years,
like, her
like,
whole life at this
longer.
point.
Yeah.
Even though he knew there was more to the story, he couldn't prove anything. 1923 began with Dolly moving into another house, this time her reasoning being to other people that she couldn't bear the thought of living where Fred was murdered. And that's a damn good reason to move, so no one questioned it. Otto still lived in the attic of her new home. Like, still lived in the attic. Because at this point, she's like, you don't have to hide from Fred, but like, we have to hide from everybody else. And
Dolly, you got something deeper going on in that
well,
head of
you
yours,
remember
buddy.
she was initially attracted to Fred because of his money. So she was is equally as excited to settle his estate. Hello, cash money, you know?
Mhm.
So she
Yeah.
turned to estate lawyer Herman Shapiro. But it
She
didn't
gonna
take
fall in love with him too?
yes, it didn't take long for Dolly to turn her affections to Shapiro, and the two started dating.
Dolly!
During one of their dates, Dolly handed Shapiro a gift, a diamond studded watch, and she told him that she wanted him to have it. It belonged to her dear husband, Fred, which also, like, if I was dating a guy and he was like, this is my
Dead wives.
dead wife's necklace, I want you to have it, I'd be like, whoa,
Too
hard pass.
fast.
Who pass?
You know that part in the 40-year-old version with Virgin, not Virgin, sorry. Yeah, when Steve Carell is like pretending to act tough and he goes, "You need to get your bitch on a leash." When he's talking to him, that's what I keep thinking in my head about Dolly. Like, you need to get that bitch on a leash.
She's Dolly had, and I'm gonna say this, and you're gonna be like, what the hell, Dolly? Dolly had also reached out to another boyfriend that she was seeing who was an actor, telling him that she had a 25 caliber gun. She was hoping he could have it, get rid of it for her because she was terrified that she would be accused of murdering Fred, even though she was innocent and would look bad because this is the same caliber gun. She was
Of course,
she was
Dolly.
so fearful that it would incriminate her, even though she was completely innocent. And her boyfriend was like, "Oh yeah, that definitely checks out. I'm gonna go to the La Brea tar pits and I'm gonna toss this gun." She also convinced a male neighbor next door that I'm sure she was having no relations with
Convinced, quote unquote.
of the same story, and he buried the second gun, in his backyard. But an eagle-eyed Chief Klein noticed this fancy watch that Shapiro was wearing because he was hanging around. He knew Dolly did something. And he knew that when Shapiro told him that Dolly gave the watch to him, he's like, "Oh, yeah, this is a gift for my girlfriend. I mean, my client, not girlfriend at all."
I mean, my client.
His suspicions were confirmed. He's like, "I got her." He's like, in his head, he's thinking, Dolly has the only thing that was taken from the house that day. Klein took the watch, like he had confiscated the watch from Shapiro and he took it to Dolly. And suddenly she had no idea. Like she had never seen that watch before in her life. She's never seen it. She doesn't know what it is, which is a lie. And that's what Klein wanted to catch her in a lie. And he finally did. He went all the way to Milwaukee to every jewelry store in the area until he found the one that sold Fred that watch. Because this is
Oh my
like,
gosh.
these are, this is not like today where everyone can get on Amazon and order like a fake diamond studded watch. Like these are hard times. This is the early 1900s, like this is not,
Yeah, this is like depression.
yeah. And
You got a
so like,
diamond watch. You bought that
yeah,
boy.
he came back from Milwaukee and immediately arrested Dolly for first degree murder. Her new actor friend read this about the story in the newspaper and went to Chief Klein to tell him about the gun, including where he disposed of it. Shapiro visited Dolly in jail and she's like, "Look, I have something I need you to ask. I need to ask of you." She told him that like this is a very special favor. She knows it sounds weird, but she's just has to do it. She said, "In my home, there's a trap door leading to the attic. It was on the second floor, located inside the closet there. She wanted Shapiro to take a generous bag of groceries to her home and knock 3 times on that trapdoor. A man would answer and take the groceries. Can you imagine? Like,
Be like, hey, honey, can
I
you
need you
go
to.
to my new house and tell my attic boyfriend that you brought him some food? Thank you.
Mhm.
Dolly really had it going on.
This whole thing sounded crazy to Shapiro, but nevertheless, he brought the
Of course
groceries
he
and he
did.
made the
Yeah.
trip to the closet in the second floor. The door to the attic opened and a man said, "Hello, Herman. Don't be afraid of me." Which I read that and like my arm, like the hair on my arm stood up because I was like, I would absolutely be afraid of this situation.
Be
This
like,
frail man in the attic coming down.
looks like fucking Nosferatu crawling out of there.
Apparently, Otto knew about Dolly's friend who was helping her out with her legal troubles.
Her
He
dear
had a,
friend, yes.
and Otto's like a middle-aged man at this point. So he's staring at this stranger who's bringing him like a full bag of groceries. And he kind of like slinked out of the closet onto the shelf and just sat there talking to him.
What
Shapiro tells Otto, like, look, I'm not her lawyer like that. Like, I'm not a criminal lawyer. And then he's like, wait, what? He starts realizing, like, maybe this get your bitch on a leash. Dolly had a really good lawyer hired who Shapiro had told about Otto. He was like, look, she does have a man living in her attic. And
Just FYI.
Frank Dominguez, who was her lawyer, told Shapiro, like, Otto needed to get the hell out of there. He's like, this is not going to look good. Like, we got to.
Where's he gonna go? This has been his home for.
Yeah. But Otto obliged because he knew that what him being there would look like for Dolly. Dominguez was
What it looked like was exactly what it was.
exactly like it would appear that the truth is coming out, so I have to dart. Dominguez was able to get the murder charges against Dolly dropped because no weapon could be linked to the killing and they had no confession because the guns that were recovered were so rusted they couldn't determine where the bullet came from. There was no physical evidence linking Dolly to the murders. And afterwards, Shapiro still wanted to date Dolly. But he had one, because like he's not a dumb man. Like he knows. He's like, okay, this guy and her, there's something weird going on. So that was part of his, like that was his stipulation. He's like, look, we can do this, but he's got to go. And Dolly agreed under the condition that Shapiro would help Otto get a job. And he agreed. He got Otto a job in San Francisco. Like he's like, I'm getting you the hell out of here, bud. You're not going to live by me anymore. You're not living in my attic ratting around. So he got him this job as a janitor in San Francisco. And Otto eventually made his way to Canada, where he quickly got married, changed his name to Walter Klein. He would eventually make his way back to LA with his wife, Matilda, but he would never make contact with his former lover. Like, that never happened. So it seemed destined that the murder of Frank Oesterreich was never going to be officially closed. No arrests were going to be, there's not going to be anyone charged, and like the charges stick for this murder. That was until Dolly and Shapiro got into a fight and Dolly threatened him, like with physical harm. So instead of cooling off and being like, look, we both said some things, maybe that's, things aren't
I
right.
apologize. Yeah.
He walked right to the police station and demanded to file a report because what Dolly didn't know is that when they were having their little bonding sesh, Otto thought that Shapiro was her criminal lawyer. She wasn't. So Otto had told Shapiro everything.
Oh my gosh, Otto.
He signed a signed affidavit recounting the story that Otto told him. And after 7 years, Otto was finally arrested for the murder, and so was Dolly. And the press loved this story. They called him Batman or the ghost in the garret. His lawyer.
Of course they did.
Of course they did. His lawyer, Early Wakeman, claimed Otto had been a toy for Dolly and had been manipulated, which he's not wrong.
Yeah, he absolutely had been.
Otto had confessed to the murder, but he said he was guilty by reason of insanity. He didn't mean to kill him. It was just a struggle for the gun. And in Otto's words, because I'm going to read this like in his own words, because his testimony had been recorded. This is what he said that he did in an average day as the attic boyfriend. I made up the beds and changed the linen about 2 times a week. They love to sleep clean, and I made up the beds for them, and I put away their clothes, and I dusted Fred's clothes because he had some beautiful things, and I would like to keep them in order for him and dust them and dust his shoes, so he would always look neat. And I would then wash the dishes if he wasn't home, and if he was home, he would wash them, and Mrs. Oesterreich would dry them because I couldn't then because they were home. I would get the vegetables clean, and they were clean. Everyone praised her, how clean her things were. And I scrubbed the floor, and I kept it clean, and I kept the floor neat. She loved to have a beautiful floor, and I dusted it. And he seemed to be really proud of the work that he did. He said that she had kept him as a sex slave, and if he was bad, that she would make it obvious that she didn't want him, like in a sexual manner, and that he would know if he had been like a good boy because like she would want him again, like referring to sex. If they got into arguments, he would also like do manipulative things to her, like he would refuse to eat for days at a time until she felt sorry for him and would give in. And the jury did not toxic. I mean, you're living in our freaking attic. What did you think it was going to be? Sunshine? Ugh. The jury
Honestly,
did not.
I could use an attic housekeeper.
Like when I was reading all the things that he was doing, I was like,
he's really putting in the work there.
He's putting in the work. I could also do that. But the jury did not convict him of murder. They did find him guilty of manslaughter. However, the statute of limitations for that offense had already expired, leaving Otto Sandhuber a free man.
I'm kind of glad. Like, I know he should not have shot him. However,
he was a victim too, though. He was a victim
he
too.
was, yeah. Like, he had been manipulated to the point. I'm honestly shocked he came out of the attic to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He was waiting for something. He was like, I got to get out of here.
He's like, wait. But he was obsessed. I'll say what he said in a minute because I feel like it's really telling to like how their relationship was. Attorney Jerry Geisler defended Dolly. He was young, and a lot of people didn't think that like he knew what he was talking about because of his age, but he was very skilled to the point of the jury was unable to reach a verdict, and for the second time she was acquitted of the charges. Dolly remarried her business manager in 1961. They had worked together for like 15 years, but she died 2 weeks later after they got married, and her entire estate went to her husband of 2 weeks, Ray Hendrick, which honestly seems a little sus to me. But the will had been, if I had not known that the will for her or the will for all of her things going to Ray was made like a decade earlier, I would be like, he killed her, which is also kind of karma, but nothing's really known about Otto's life after he was released. It's assumed that he just like, because he was married and he was a good husband to his wife. The home that Fred was murdered in was turned into apartments, one of them being in the attic, which is like, whew. But they asked him why he stayed there. Like they asked Otto, like, why are you staying in this? You're living in an attic. Like you don't even have a bathroom. Like what is happening? And he was like, I stayed in that attic because the only person in the entire world who cared if Otto was, and he's like spoken third person about it, was alive or dead was there. And that was Dolly. He was obsessed with her.
Oh.
But she was a bitch and manipulative and
but she was a bitch. Yeah, what the?
Because immediately she went to money. Like it was like, wait a second, this isn't convenient for me. Like I'm not getting anything out of this.
Yeah. Ugh. That was wild. What in the dickens?
Mm-hmm. I had to do something a little different that I hadn't done before. I was like, wow, this is weird.
Well, you've done 2 in a row of people like mysterious things living in houses, or maybe not living in houses.
I thought about that. I thought about that when I was writing this.
You're on a kick.
That's actually how it kind of spiraled. And I was like, this is insane. Like, I have to talk about this because one, I don't think my husband could ever keep a separate woman in the house unless she really does want to come out down and like do all my chores. Like, I'm good with that.
In that
I'll
case, like,
step out.
well,
I'll just step out a little bit.
maybe it was a rat I heard up there.
It's like that TikTok where like the guy picks up the phone and they're like asking for the same woman. And he's like, that's my wife. He's like, that's my girlfriend. And then tell her all of the car note that I pay, the grocery money I send, the house payment. And he was like, oh man, I'm just kidding. I'll tell her I'm her brother. I'll tell you who you called. I played it for my husband. I was like, what would you do? I was like, and he was like, is he paying for all of those things? I was like, yeah, it's a TikTok. It's like, obviously it's a joke. He's like, I'd probably still be okay with it. But that's a lot of work. Like,
it's a job at that point. It really is.
So this woman had a husband, a job, and a side piece. Like that was like not just like I'm gonna call you.
Well,
on
it
my
sounds
man
like
leave.
she had several side pieces.
Several. Like, I don't like to slut shame, but you're keeping a man in your attic.
Dolly, not cool.
Not cool, Dolly. Like, let him go get some action too. But I mean, who has the time if you're making him do it 8 times a day? I can't. I can't even imagine. I'm exhausted just thinking about
that. So you just to like mildly stay on the topic, but also change it. You said like that sounded like somebody on meth would do, and I had this person who sided our house. Okay, my husband's uncle had this guy who came to him and was like, I'll side the house, I can side a house. So he had him come, and like this dude had meth like on his face when he came to the door to talk to us.
That's unfortunate.
We on several occasions found him sleeping in our like yard at 2 a.m. and like we had a cherry picker at the house because we have like a tall house.
Yeah.
And on the 4th of July, this dude was up there with a beer in the dark and the cherry picker to watch the fireworks that you could see.
I love that for him. I'm like crying.
Like he was so crazy. He stole an electrical cord out of our garage, like one of the nice ones, or like an extension cord. And also
Did he finish the siding?
It took so long. It took like months and months. And like he would just leave and we wouldn't see him and he would come back and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I was in jail for the weekend." Or like he was in jail for like a week and he couldn't get out. And then it was just like, and we found out after he finally left, and I was like complaining about him constantly. I was like, this is not safe. This is not a safe person to have citing our house. After he left, I found out that his uncle had hired him because he said he would do it for free. And he had cited our house for just whatever his uncle ended up giving him. I don't even know.
I'm going to piggyback on that because I have an equally crazy story that I was like, what in the meth out south is happening? The house that my in-laws rented for us in Tybee was very nice. It was like on a little canal, like the backyard backed up to this canal. And like it's the south. So in this like canal was an alligator.
A body?
I wish.
Oh, an alligator, yeah.
It was an alligator. I got to witness, because like I've seen, I lived in the South for a long time. So like it's not a big deal. There was like a fence and everything. Like we named him Hannibal and he just kind of like cruised around, and there was a little shit that popped off with a couple baby turtles that lived in there. But I got to witness, it was honestly pretty insane. I'm pretty sure Hannibal the cannibal ate one of these babies. Well, like an alarm bell went off because like 10 full grown turtles like circled him And I was like, "Oh my god, the shit's about to go down. Hannibal's gonna get his ass kicked by some turtles because they were, like, coming in."
This is so exciting.
It is. So I'm, like, watching this, like, turtle fight club in the back river, and it's, like, 2 days of this. Like, it's 2 days of, like, this same because he's not very big. He's, like, maybe 3 feet, 4 not 3 feet, like, maybe 4 or 5 feet. And he's, like, just, like,
He was
kinda
like a
little
teenage.
like a teenager. Like, his mom was probably like, "Look, Jeff, like, don't go too far. Come back soon." So this happens, and honestly, it's really cool to see. It was awesome for me to see nature's system of, like, checks and balances because, like, I picture alligators as, like, "Oh my god, they're gonna kill anything," and I kept, like, spouting off random alligator facts, like, as we were watching them, but, like, these turtles were really keeping this alligator in check. So, like, the 3rd day we're there, I'm out on the back porch with my daughter, my mother-in-law's out there with my nephew, and I hear what I thought was, like, drunk mumbling, yelling at us from across the river, and I'm like, "I don't know, I can't hear you, like, I don't know what you're saying." Well, I walk inside because 'cause I'm like, "This is awkward, I don't know what this man is saying."
So it was a guy yelling at you?
It was a guy yelling at us. He is asking my mother-in-law what we thought about the alligator, and we were like, "We don't live here, like, we don't live here." He said, "I think it's gonna eat one of my kids." And I was like, "It's unlikely because it's tiny, but I get your."
Your
He's like, "If you
concern.
I get your concern. These are protected, like, there's signs all over the place, like, don't fuck with the wildlife." He says, "If you hear a loud noise, don't worry about it," as he's cocking a fucking shotgun.
Whoa, this story just got crazy because I thought you were gonna tell me about how these turtles fucked this alligator up,
No.
but then it's this crazy guy with a
'Cause I
shotgun.
had, like, walked back out and, like, my daughter's on my hip because, like, that's what we do, and I'm my mother-in-law's like, "Get inside, get inside, get inside." And I hear it. They shoot the alligator in this canal in a private neighborhood. There's houses everywhere. He tosses it like renegade style, like off to his wife who takes off inside the house and then they just disappear. Like they were out there working on their deck or something. I think they just moved in because they were doing like a lot of renos and they
Did
just
they
left.
eat
And
it?
I I don't know, but I always run my mouth to the point that my husband like, I talked about, like, when we went to California and there was the guy in the seat next to us who, like, smacked his daughter, and I looked at my husband, was like, "I think I'm gonna get you into a fight today."
Today's the day.
But I was saying things very loudly, which stressed my husband out to the point he was ready to leave because I was like, "We have to call the police, that's illegal, like, he just shot an alligator, like a baby alligator, the turtles had it under control, he wasn't going anywhere."
The turtles had it
And
under
then, like, my kids
control.
were asking where the alligator was, and I was like, "This is the most cracked out thing I've ever seen." Like, we were just like, "We don't live here." He's like, "If you hear something loud, don't worry about it." And you know my mother-in-law, her face was just like, "Get inside, get inside." And then
As he's like
he's
one arm
cocking the
cocking
shot.
his
Yeah,
like shoddy.
it
Oh my
was
god.
something out of a movie. I thought and then there's a lot of drama going on with this because the lady 2 houses down would feed them, like,
The
very Lake Placid,
alligator
like
or the turtle?
yes, I think a little bit of both. She would sit on
Both?
this swing that would swing, and she would toss food in there, and they would just, like I was like, "This is
Like the
some Lake Pla"
ducks, like
the
bread.
ducks, like the ducks. I was like, "This is very Lake Placid," and it was
It was Waterboy.
but my husband was like, "You're gonna get us killed." Like, he killed an alligator in broad daylight because this is, like, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
What was the lady mad? Do you know?
I don't know, she was looking for it the next day, though,
You
and
should
I
have been
told
like, "Hey, hey, hey, that guy, it was
he
him.
it was him, like,
He murdered that alligator and you need
I
to do
felt like the
something about
nosy
it."
neighbors that called when Fred got shot. I was like, "We gotta call the police." Like, I heard this, and my husband's like, "We are not getting involved." And I was like, I'm such a rule follower with that. I was like, "It's illegal.
You
It's illegal.
can't
I
just
just witnessed
shoot
a murder."
you just can't shoot teenage alligators. The turtles have it the
Like,
turtles have it under control.
that's what I was like,
The
"Why did you
Ninja
do"
Turtles are on patrol
Megan,
in
when
the
I tell
canal.
you I was watching this happen, and I was watching the alligator swim to this baby turtle. He did get one of them, I'm quite certain. Um, but turtle heads just kept popping up, and they're big ass turtles. I was like, oh man, they're about to fuck him up.
Oof. That made my toes like curl because I just pictured him like getting one.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And he just like would go away, like because they didn't even have to attack him. Like he just knew
There's
that
like,
they
hey,
could
there's more of you than there are of, or there's
me.
more of us than there are of you. Yeah.
Yeah, like we could kick your ass, Ted. Like
This
you want to do
alligator
this?
has 3 separate names now.
3, yeah. Jeff,
Ted,
Ted.
Jeff, Hannibal. Yeah.
I just felt so sad. I was like, I am not like, oh my God, I should go have an alligator in my backyard. But like, I felt connected to it. I named him, and I heard a murder. And I was like, the balls on this guy to like just yell out to strangers, like,
Like he was obviously looking for some kind of like justification. Like you wanted to be like, yeah, that thing's dangerous. Someone should take care of it. Like that's
yeah,
what
it
he
bit my
wanted.
arm.
But
Like
instead, you were like, yeah,
we
I
don't
don't
live here.
know.
And I
And
gave
so
him
he
the
was.
same look that I give my 12-year-old when he tries to talk to me and he talks so fast. I'm just like, I can't help you, bud. Like, I don't know.
I don't know what. I don't understand the words
Slow
that are coming
down.
out of your mouth.
I
Yeah.
always say, like, you sound like you have marshmallows in your mouth. Like that's how you talk. Like you have marshmallows in your
Slow
mouth.
down.
And this guy was yelling, and like I had been at the beach, like I had a few drinks. Like I was like, I don't know what's happening. And then he is like, if you hear something, because like my mother-in-law was still standing out there, like talking to him, like yelling back and forth. I'm
I
like,
see that.
go
Yeah.
back inside. You don't know what he's saying either. So that's why I walked out there when I saw the guy like cock the shotgun. I was like, if you hear something loud, I have never ran so fast. I was like, what if it ricochets? Like, he could kill me. And there's
Well, I'm
kids.
sorry that you lost. Yeah, there are children also.
There are children on
around.
my hip. Like, there are kids here. He's like, it's going to kill my kid. It's like, well, first off, no, he's not.
I'm sorry your new pet alligator was murdered
Right in front of me.
in cold blood.
In cold blood. The turtles were probably happy though, because there were a lot of babies out there. I felt
Baby
like
turtles.
the turtles circled him and they were like, why don't you pick on someone your own size, man?
Like they were bullying the alligator afterwards.
And then I was talking about how fast alligators can run on land, because I think they're like faster on land than they are swimming.
I've read that as well. I
And
don't know if it's
I
true, but
determined that if it was really chasing me, that my husband would be the one I trip.
yeah, I bet you could run faster than him. I bet it would be
I
fine.
know that I could run faster than him.
Like you wouldn't even have to trip him. You just have to run faster.
And I'm not trying to brag, but I can run faster than all 3 of my kids too. So may the odds
so they're also getting eaten by alligators.
may the odds be in your
Connie's
favor.
willing to throw her family in the bayou, no questions asked.
I was like, I looked at my husband, I was like, this is some shit that I would see happening when I lived in Louisiana. I'd have been like, oh yeah, that's rad. Alligator season, get your tags. But like this, I was like, you are in a residential neighborhood, good sir.
What do you mean get your tags?
Like you can hunt alligators in Louisiana. I think you can hunt them anywhere, but like in Louisiana specifically, and you have so many tags that you get, like that's how many alligators you're allowed to shoot. But they would not
Maybe
have
that guy was just hungry and he just ate it.
I don't know, because they knew they weren't supposed to, because it's illegal. So like he tossed his wife like they were in a militia. It was so like, and then I'd see him toss it. She grabs it and runs in.
They were like, a 2-person army against a teenage alligator.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what Hannibal.
I never saw him again after that. So I'm assuming that he did indeed succumb to his injuries. But then I would lay awake
I
at
thought
night.
you were talking about the guy. Did you see the guy after it?
Well, it was really weird situation. They would work at night a lot on this like deck and fence that they were building. I'm assuming because it was so hot. But I would just sit out there and like drink a few White Claws and like talk loudly about it, to the point my husband would make me go to bed.
Yeah. You're
If you
gonna get
can't
his.
do that,
He's
I
gonna
was like,
cock his
look, I'll
shotgun at us.
fight him. I was like, I could fight him. And he's like, no, you can't. You can fight him
I think
for me.
you could. I think you could. I think you and an alligator, that guy wouldn't have a chance.
I'd be like, Hannibal, I got your back. Let's go. 30
You
miles
put-
per hour, right, bro?
You put like
let me
a
just catch
pink
a
like
ride.
harness leash on him.
Like one
You
of the
guys-
studded ones that they give to dogs when they're in like, those.
You know the bad guy in Rescuers Down Under, the lady, and she like walks her alligators on the leash. That's you.
I felt it was just like an overall emotional week, and I felt like I was stunned. He's like, why are you so upset? I was like, I don't know. Like, it's just a
Because
combination
you
of it.
connected to that.
I did.
You were having a moment. And
And
he
I
took
was
that
talking to
moment
my
from you.
kid. Like, my kids really liked watching it, like the whole like nature thing. And my daughter was so into it. Like, she was pumped.
She's
And
like,
I just
I'm gonna ride that alligator.
it's probably what she was like. And then my oldest kept saying, I ate alligator once. And I was like, don't tell people that. Just
don't tell people that. Shh, the alligator will hear you.
shh. He's our friend.
Not anymore. Well, R.I.P. Jeff,
R.I.P.
Ted, Hannibal.
If any of you guys have any stories like that, please tell us.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Memories.
It's just like core memories. Like anytime something happens like that, I'm like, my daughter's going to remember being held on my hip as I run fast, which
away
never
from a
happens.
guy with the shotgun. Yeah, for sure.
Like a shotty. And it wasn't, I think it was like sawed off because it didn't look like a full-size shotgun. But then again, like I didn't have like glasses or any type of visual aids to help. So maybe it was. I don't know. I also am speaking about this like I know a lot about guns. And I don't. I just know I saw him cock it like with one hand, and I was like, Jesus.
Like that definitely didn't happen, but I believe you that it happened. Like I'm picturing it.
He was like, maybe he had the other one down, but from across this river, I saw him with one hand, and I'm, what is it from Step Brothers? He looked at me and said, let's get it on.
Let's get it on. Him and that alligator.
Like if we call, my husband was like, if we call the police, he's gonna know it was us.
He could have thought it was the lady that was feeding the alligators like they were ducks.
She was swinging on like a swing set, like an adult size swing set, like out over the water. And I was like, you are a brave lady.
That sounds awesome.
No.
That sounds super fun.
With turtles that I'm sure can bite my face off, and an alligator.
Yeah, they'll get your little toes. Ooh.
These turtles were big. They were like, I don't know. They were full-size turtles. Maybe they were growing the turtles for turtle stew, and they thought that the alligator was going to impede on that, and that's why they shot him. I don't know. I don't know their motive, because I never saw a kid out there. So maybe he was saying cat. I don't know. Also, if you're listening to this, and you are that guy, you're an asshole. And that was traumatic.
What if he's a big fan? And he was like, I can't believe that was her.
Don't meet your heroes, because I'll punch you right in the face.
Don't meet your heroes. Because we have very strong feelings about alligators. Oh, man. I think that's a good spot. I think you guys should all just have a safe 4th of July, okay?
Yeah, be careful. Don't drink and drive.